for the introduction. That's very kind. I think I actually must talk to Patrick because towards the end of this year, I'm going to need food for 500, not quite 5,000, but 500 in Angola. So that technology looks quite interesting from that point of view. Yeah, can we kick off with the first slide? As you're aware, we're looking at this rare earth supply chain and have brought our original concept out of supplying raw materials from an African mine to beneficiating it and bringing it through for further processing in the UK. As part of this whole build-up to supplying critical magnet metals into the green industry in the UK. Next slide, please. I'm not going to give you a lecture in terms of the criticality of rare earths. I think most people have actually come to understand why this has emerged over the last 4 or 5 years associated with the energy transformation in both the electric vehicle and wind turbine industries to become an issue in terms of the overall supply chain. And there are very few at this point in time that are participating in this, and bringing it closer to home is one of those important things in terms of market competitiveness going forward on a whole bunch of fronts. Next slide, please. Key in this whole thing is China. We're currently completely reliant on China for much of the manufacture and production of the bits and pieces, the widgets that go into making our technology work at the moment. And added to that, they're also cleaning up their act quite substantially. Started that around 4 or 5 years ago, and the big issue there is they're going to consume most of it. I mean, the consumption demand forecasts in China are significant, and it's going to be key to actually establishing more of these supply chains outside of China to reduce dependence on supply and pricing coming out of China. Next slide. This has obviously been recognized by the strategists, and over the last 18 months or so has really been crystallized in a number of incentives and initiatives that have happened in Europe and in association with the UK. And some of you might have noticed and picked up on Biden's recent establishment of a committee to actually investigate this side of things in the UK, further to Trump's previous initiatives. And we believe that the time couldn't be more opportune to be involved in this particular sector. Next slide, please. Just to give you an idea of scale, you know, with the rollout of Volkswagen's range and so on, what we're proposing to do at Saltend in terms of production of the critical magnet metals for the drivetrain of the EV and the wind turbine side of things is that Volkswagen would effectively consume all of the life of mine of Longonjo, which is some 23 years at the moment, and just in this single new automotive line. Next slide. How do we end up in Saltend is kind of one of the key questions that is pertinent to this particular subject. Is we looked around when we were initially deliberating on value adding to the actual mine product from the Angolan operations. And We touched with a number of the other port-centered development opportunities in the UK, such as Merseyside and Teesside, and Europe in Saxony and so on. And really, Saltend stepped out in terms of in terms of hospitality, and the actual mechanisms to actually fast track a project. I mean, what we're doing has been started a little over 9 months ago, and to actually achieve planning permission within that time frame based on a design that we fast tracked has been quite phenomenal. As I mentioned, we're looking at producing around 5% of the total projected demand in 2025, after coming online in around about mid-2023. And this will be one of 3 global installations that is similar in capacity of that nature. Next slide, please. Obviously, the Freeport status is key for us. We've got concentrates coming in from the Angolan operation, and then both the opportunity for local consumption in the UK and export onwards to other markets in Europe. And this Freeport status, not to belabor the point on it, has been key in that decision-making process. We were anticipating that it would happen and delighted that it did. Next slide, please. Just a brief layout in terms of, and apologies for the resolution on this on the large screen, but unfortunately I'm based down in Cape Town at the moment, and the best I can do is Google Earth in terms of giving you an idea of what it's going to look like. But that's the Saltend facility in the background. Air Products just to the right-hand side of it, and the port obviously directly to the left and less than a kilometre away. So our transport and materials handling requirements in this particular location are ideally suited to the Saltend facilities. And in addition to that, the jetty, in terms of its reagent supply and so on, is a key factor in that. And coupled with that is that being able to focus on the core business of separation of rare earth products, being supplied over the fence with all power, utilities, water, steam, demineralized water, fuel, etc., makes it an ideal location for this type of facility. And in a community which has had a chemical engineering bent for many, many years, providing the opportunities for a skill set that is perfectly matched to the type of processing we're going to be doing there, which is all about chemistry. Next slide, please. We haven't wasted much time since the planning permission came through, and in conjunction with the team from PX at Saltend, the guys are already putting together the provisional plans for site clearance and getting on with the job of preparing for a main construction process at the end of this year. Next slide, please. Just to put it in context, at the moment, really outside of China, there are 2 producers. There's Linus, which has been based in Australia, mining operations there and processing in Malaysia, and looking back to bringing that processing back to Australia from Malaysia. And Mountain Pass Materials, which was historically the actual core producer of rare earths a couple of decades ago, and has now been resuscitated. And all of us are going to be in a similar production bracket of around about 4.5 6,000 tons of the key magnet metals to supply this whole energy transformation revolution. Next slide, please.
Tim, you have 2 minutes. Okay.
Just in terms of the actual value curve, just to give you an idea why we've chosen Saltend and the process there in terms of Pensana's aspirations to move downstream later on from the generation of oxide into metal production and magnet metal supply. This is where we are going to be sitting on the value curve. So it's right up there in terms of the overall value generation in the UK. Next slide. I'm not going to dwell too much on this. I think we're all familiar with the H2H side of things with Equinor and the wind turbine industry development. Next slide. And last but not least, in the longer term, we're really looking at how we can be a party to the circular economy. As we mature the process and so on, we're going to actually be exploring avenues to actually reprocess and recycle magnet materials, and the plant design at Saltend has accommodated that in its design process to date. I think I should stop there, backed by a pretty well-experienced team. At this point in time, we are building that as the days go by in terms of bringing in new blood from the whole area into the process as well.